Welcome back. It's time for Focus. Now, it's almost a year since Libya's Muammar Gaddafi met a brutal end at the hands of NATO-backed rebels. It was hoped the death of the dictator would herald a new era of democracy and freedom for Libya, and those hopes were given a boost by swift and relatively smooth elections. But the optimism was somewhat short-lived. Libya today still lacks a strong central government, arms flow freely, and there are worrying signs of an increase in sectarian violence. And that was highlighted by the decision of the Interior Minister to quit. Fawzi Abd Alal had been heavily criticised for failing to protect minorities.
A resignation that exposes weaknesses within Libya's fledgling security forces. 9 months after his swearing in, the country's interior minister resigned. Minister Fawzi Abd Alal quit in response to criticism over his handling of sectarian violence in the country. On Friday, hardline Islamists destroyed a Sufi mausoleum in the western city of Zlitan, leaving it in rubble. The next day, attackers bulldozed another Sufi shrine, this time in the country's capital and in broad daylight. Police reportedly did nothing to stop them. The country's National Congress has pointed the finger at the Interior Ministry for being too lax and even implicated the ministry in the destruction.
What is truly regrettable and suspicious is that some of those who took part in these destructive activities are supposed to be part of the security forces and from the revolutionaries.
The debacle is a sign of the security challenges that continue to face Libya almost a year after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. One major concern, tensions between different Muslim sects in this devout country, particularly between followers of the mystical Sufi tradition and ultra-conservative Salafis. Sufi mausoleums in particular are attracting Salafi anger. Hardline Islamists say Sufi tombs to Islamic saints are idolatrous because they inspire devotion that should be reserved for God alone. Experts say that such attacks could continue until the Libyan state becomes more muscular.
There's a very strong opposition between Salafi and Sufi tradition. We'll continue to see this violence. We simply hope that progressively Libyan institutions will be built up that will help regulate, but this will take a lot of time.
The lack of a strong central government, a weak police and military force, and the prevalence of arms are proving to be difficult roadblocks in Libya, following more than 40 years of dictatorship.
Well, tonight's Focus guest is Frederick Wary. He's a senior associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He joins us tonight from Washington. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Now, this isn't the first violent incident, of course, in Libya since the new government was appointed. Why is there such a struggle to impose security?
The state really lacks resources and authority. I mean, you have to remember that this is a temporary government that is facing a very strong opposition from numerous militias. These are the fighting groups that ousted Gaddafi. They're keeping their arms. They're organized really on a regional basis. And they're really causing problems for the state. The formal police forces and the formal army remain weak. They're unable to assert their authority. And this is really the crux of the matter.
Now, there's an awful lot of arms flowing around Libya as well. This is part of the problem too, isn't it?
Absolutely. The country's awash in arms. We've seen some indication that the government is trying to get a handle on this, to collect the arms, to register the arms. But the country has very porous borders, and these arms are flowing into neighboring countries.
Now, most of the violence is thought to be the work of those that support the former regime, that support Muammar Gaddafi. Can they be brought into the political process, or are they resolutely determined to stay outside of it?
I believe they can be brought in, and we're talking really here about pockets of sympathy for Gaddafi, certain towns like Beni Walid and Sirte. I would caveat this that it's very easy for this government to shift the blame to Gaddafi loyalists. In fact, we don't really have solid evidence of who's behind a lot of these attacks. The recent ones against the Sufi shrines, it's clear that these are Islamists. But in many cases, the assassinations that we've seen in the East, the car bombs, we just don't know who's behind this.
There's been a lot of talk about tribal loyalties in Libya and how it's divided along those lines, as opposed to, say, Syria, which has more divided along sectarian and ethnic lines. Do you see these tribal divisions becoming more and more highlighted?
They could be if effective institutions to bring people together are not developed. I mean, the tribal system was really the way that Gaddafi ruled because people did not have a voice in their own government. So Gaddafi inflated the power of the tribes. So what's necessary now is first a constitution, an effective parliament, local councils to get people involved in their own governance, and this will really dissipate the power of the tribes.
Now, the Libyans, when people were looking at this from the outside, I mean, this was a country that appeared very, very united in their aim to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. If there's one thing most Libyans agreed on, it was that he was a brutal dictator. Why now can they not unite behind building a new country? I mean, this is a country that has a lot of potential. It has oil wealth, it's on the coast, you know, it has the support of the international community. Why is there this big obstacle to peace and democracy?
Well, I probably wouldn't cast it in such stark terms. I mean, there is this violence that's going on, but we're not talking about open warfare. We're not talking about warlords. We're not talking about Lebanon during the 1980s or Somalia. This is a country where the population is relatively united in terms of ethnicity, and you're seeing people really pull together, I think. There are these differences. But when I was there, there's a real collective sense that they cannot let this revolution fail, and I think that's important to recognize.
And do you think that they will be able to do that?
Well, we're going to be entering a critical period for that. This is going to hinge really on the Constitution, how they develop these institutions. I would say that I'm guardedly optimistic. But again, the key issue is the security front and building these security institutions that will increase people's faith in the government and prevent these instances from happening like we've seen recently. All
right. Frederick Wary at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you very much indeed for being our focus guest this evening. Well, that's all we have time for. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, all the rest of the international headlines. Don't go away.